Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. First, I do need to apologize. It looks like we had a technical issue, which is something we're all dependent on in a world of virtual events and virtual experiences. I'm sure we've all been on a Zoom call or a conference call that has not gone the way we all planned, but I promise you, I had some good stuff coming up in that opening. So we're going to do a recording and make that available to all of you. But again, my apologies and thanks for your patience and hanging in there with us. I also want to thank and to welcome the Assistant CEO of Policy and Planning for the Singapore Tourism Board, Jeannie Lim. Jeannie, welcome back actually to Arival. You spoke at Arival Bangkok last year, so it's great to have you back.
That's right. Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Now, we were also supposed to have Dr. Mario Hardy, the CEO of PATA, with us. Unfortunately, due to some other technical issues, Mario is not able to join us this morning. So we're going to have to work on something with Mario and get him on for a future Arival event. So, but let's dive in here. You know, one of the questions that I began to pose, and which I really said, frankly, was unanswerable, is, what is the outlook? When will travel resume? Now, I'm not going to put you officially on the spot with a crystal ball, but can I ask you? I mean, so STB has got a reputation as one of the leading national tourism organizations across the region, and Singapore, a crucial hub. I mean, travel is, it's the lifeblood of Singapore in so many ways. How are you thinking about this, and how are you working with your partners in government? Like, how are you putting policies in place? What are you planning for in Singapore?
Yeah, thanks. So I think there were several questions within that. So I'll try and break it up and address that bit by bit. But you're right. I think tourism has always been a very key part of Singapore's economy, and I think all the more at a time like that, people do realize the long-ranging impacts of tourism beyond just the pure tourism receipts that tourists spend. I think the impact on jobs, the impact on many of the peripheral companies within the whole tourism ecosystem, whether it's F&B, retail, a lot of suppliers, whether they're security, laundry companies. I mean, the impact is indeed quite wide-ranging. It has been very tough for us, like with many other destinations or around the world. For us, it started really towards the end of January. And I think that's really when we started to really get pulled into and start being aware of the severity of COVID-19 and the potential impact. I must admit, though, at the very start, I think we were kind of thinking, okay, we had some experience with SARS. Maybe this was something like that. And with SARS, we actually had quite a quick rebound. We had what we call a V-shaped recovery. In this case, I don't know. A lot of people kind of say we don't know whether we've seen the bottom of the barrel yet, and it'll be a long winter. Even though there's no winter in Singapore, I think we do realize that this will be tourism is not going to recover in the next 3 months or so. Definitely not in the second half of this year, which we are already midway through. But we're still hopeful for next year. So what have we been up to? I suppose the first important thing we needed to do was to really form a kind of what we call a close engagement platform with the key industry partners and players within the tourism sector. So we convened the Tourism Recovery Action Task Force quite early on, and this comprises people from the different industry associations, whether they're from hotels, attractions, the travel agents, tour operators, as well as the precinct associations. And we also had people from F&B and retail because we see that they're a key part of the tourism sector for us. So we convened that very early on as a platform for us to be able to engage and communicate as the situation was evolving. And there are a lot of unknowns. I think what was most important is that we had this platform to kind of keep each other updated. So for the government, it was really to get immediate sensing from the industry, from the companies, in terms of what was the impact to them, what were some of the relief measures that they were looking to the government to provide, so that we could then work on that back end. So between February and now, our finance minister and deputy prime minister has since announced four different budgets, as well as most recently a ministerial statement, um, encompassing a whole slew of different relief measures, really to look at supporting tourism companies. They have been receiving the most amount of support because we do realize that with this pandemic, it's really been aviation and tourism that has really suffered the most and taken the biggest hit. So we have had quite a wide suite of measures really to support them. So that was really
There
the
have
first half.
Mhm.
Yes, go
So
ahead,
just
Doug.
on this, there have been, I guess, everyone is watching what's happening so closely and, reading, if, reading kind of developments and looking for, signs of hope. So there's been discussion and some articles written about potential, travel corridors between certain markets. I think you've announced business travel or government travel corridor with China and perhaps another market. There's just some news today about the Kingdom of Brunei and New Zealand. Can you tell us? I mean, what can we draw from that? Is that a glimmer of of light,
Yes.
or what?
Yes, well, definitely, and I think we are really trying to reopen as much as we can, but in a very safe way. And I think we do need to consider all the risks involved because at the end of the day, the health and safety of our residents and citizens remain the primary focus. So yes, you're very right. I think we first announced the border reopening with China, and then with Malaysia. So that's where we allow really what we call essential and business travel. With Malaysia, because we do have land crossings with them as well, we have additional to the reciprocal green lane arrangements, we have what we call a periodic commuting arrangement so that people from Singapore who are working in Malaysia and vice versa, they have a means of going to and fro between the two countries and having some home leave as well and being able to see their family. And you're right, the most recent announcement has been opening up of the borders to Brunei as well as to New Zealand. And this is for general travel. And so that's definitely, I think, a step in the right direction. And as more and more countries are able to show that, they do have control of the situation, and we deem that the number of cases remain fairly low, and an acceptable risks level, I think we're quite confident then of also easing further restrictions. So, for example, I think for some of those coming in from some other countries, beyond those that I've already mentioned, there's been some shortening of the stay home notice that is required of them from 14 days that has been brought down to 7 days. So, these are all different measures that we're looking at really to restart travel, and have some of the borders open again so that, it helps to boost our aviation as well as tourism sector.
So what about specifically on attractions? So attractions have been open now for some time in Singapore. In fact, we have the deputy CEO, KF Lee from Gardens by the Bay. One of the, if there's an image that comes to my mind when I think of Singapore, it's probably those gardens. Can you tell us a bit about the state of reopening and what are some of the things you've done to work with attractions, as well as, and not just the big attractions too, but there's lots of small tour operators, walking tours, some fantastic food tours in Singapore. How are you working with
Yeah.
all of those different types of partners?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. So we started looking at this reopening of some of these tourism establishments in around middle of July. So since then, we have actually allowed hotels to open for leisure purposes and for staycations. Attractions, we have some around 40 attractions that have since opened. And you're right, not all of them are the large scale attractions. Some of them are the smaller attractions and museums as well. And I'm quite happy to say for tours as well. So how we've opened is we've really worked with them on an application basis. So we worked very closely with them to develop a set of protocols and guidelines of what we call safe management measures. So we developed that in consultation with the industry as well as with the Ministry of Health. And once we had that, and then we had companies that are looking to reopen, basically put in the application to the government. And so between Singapore Tourism Board, where I'm at, as well as the Ministry of Trade and Industry, we would review the applications and then give them approvals to restart. Tours have been quite popular, I must say, since we allowed tours to restart from middle of July till now. We have run over 400 tours that have catered to a few thousand customers in Singapore. So that's been fantastic because it's been part also of our what we call our domestic campaign that's been termed Singapore Rediscovers. We launched this campaign a couple of weeks ago in partnership with Enterprise Singapore as well as the Sentosa Development Corporation, really to encourage and to rally locals and residents in Singapore to rediscover different parts of Singapore that they never had the opportunity to. And tours definitely has been a big part of that.
So, but local tourism, though, is, so, this has been talked about a lot. In fact, we have a workshop later today devoted to this issue. And certainly in some markets, perhaps in Australia, in Japan, certainly in China, United States, where I'm based, there's a fairly sizable domestic tourism market. But there are many markets across Asia Pacific that are really tremendously dependent on international tourism. I have to ask you, is it moving the needle for attractions and operators in Singapore?
Yeah, well, it's helping. Will it ever make up for the loss of international traffic for Singapore? No, because we definitely, like you say, we have such a small domestic market. It's not going to make up for the lack of international tourism. However, we're doing all we can. So beyond the campaign, recently as well, the government has announced a 320 million campaign where we will be giving tourism or Singapore Rediscover vouchers, really to encourage Singapore citizens to go and spend it to rediscover their local culture and heritage, art, architecture, and so on and so forth. So that we're taking in together with reopening of borders. And I think in a concerted approach, we also have other measures where we're looking at supporting companies to repivot or to review their business models to see what they can do. So very much like this Arival Summit, I think we're encouraging and we're supporting a lot of businesses to also look at going virtual, going hybrid, going online, and how they can really repivot their business models to cater to the international traffic, or at least create further awareness during this time. So some good examples to share. One is from an attraction, the Wildlife Reserve, which is behind the Singapore Zoo
Mm-hmm.
and the River Safari. So they have actually launched quite an interesting behind the scenes virtual animal experience called Walking the Wild Side. And this has allowed them to monetize some of these experiences, but it also allows people that were not able to go to the zoo physically to actually get up close, personal, quite
Hello.
popular as well.
One of the key issues around, of course, reopening is safety, health, hygiene, social distancing. One of the things that we've seen in our own reopening research is that attractions and tour operators around the world have really struggled because of a lack of standards, a lack of clear kind of policies and consistency around in different markets. And another okay, looks like I just dropped off for a second. Do we have Jeannie?
Hi, Doug. I think we
Oh,
got cut off.
sorry about that. Okay, sorry about that. So uh, I
Yeah,
was saying,
safety, you were talking about standards.
yeah, but also one of the issues that we saw come out of the research that we've done with operators around reopening is they've struggled with the lack of standards and clear policies, and most of them, a majority, have not gotten guidance from their local DMOs or tourism organizations. So I've got my closing question. It's a two-parter. I know I sometimes do these two-part questions, but so the first is, what's your approach to working with attractions and operators with regard to standards and helping them reopen? But then the other piece too is how what should operators be doing to engage with local DMOs? And likewise, what should DMOs and national tourism organizations be doing at a time like this? So if I'm an operator, what should
Mm,
I be expecting of my version of STB or a
yeah.
local STB wherever I am?
Yeah, thanks. So I think it's definitely very important to have a consistent set of standards and guidelines. And that's ultimately because it's health and safety that you don't want to put at risk, and you don't want to have inconsistent standards. So across, nationally, we have some accreditation standards called SG Clean or Singapore Clean. But beyond that, what I would recommend is that, the different tourism establishments can come together and have an industry voice, and they can work in collaboration with their DMO or their national tourist organization to really develop a set of guidelines in consultancy, of course, with health professionals. And with a consistent set of guidelines, they can then go out and they can tell customers to say, this is the set of guidelines that has been developed, the protocols that addresses safety, crisis management, what do we do in the case of someone feeling unwell. And I think this is ultimately so important to give assurance, trust, and confidence to tourists and to their customers, who will then want to and feel comfortable being able to revisit tours and attractions again. Because without such standards in place, I don't know about you, but generally all of us would not feel safe and comfortable and feel that a lot of unknown. So the more information we can provide, the more consistency that we can have in terms of high standards of safety and protocol and sanitation, I think that will definitely boost confidence and help tourism and travel to restart as soon as possible.
Great. Well, we've gone a couple of minutes over, but thank you all for staying with us. Jeannie, thank you so much for joining us and sharing
Thank you
your
very much.
perspectives and what you've learned. Okay.